making a real difference to the amount of money people have left at the end of the week, and it frees them up to drive an economic recovery that leads to job creation. It'll also show up in rents, which we've already seen falling as landlords pay less on their mortgage. All of this is good news, but it's only possible because the government is saving its own money. When the government wastes less, the people eat more, and that's precisely what we're seeing transmitted through interest rates right now. I reckon that's enough. Oh, sorry, yep. Yeah, look, it's been a very hard recovery from too much government waste, too much inflation, too high interest rates. Those dominoes are now falling back up so that people can have some relief and breathe at the end of the week. That can only lead to greater optimism for New Zealand households and businesses, leading to job growth. But all of this is possible only because the government is managing its own books the way that so many households had to while we had a government that was spending and wasting too much. Very simple equation. The government wastes less, the people eat more. Right? Well, the Reserve Bank's got a mandate to keep inflation between 1 and 3% in the medium term. We'd expect them to do that. But what they've shown today is that they've got confidence in the government's fiscal management, that we're not going to blow out the way governments have in the last few years. Therefore, they can afford to be looser on interest rates, and that means effectively money is being transferred from government, which has been far too wasteful, to households and businesses, which are desperate for that drink after a long time. Inflation is the government's official policy to be between 1 and 3%. So yes, I'm happy as long as it's between the target band of 1 and 3%.
Can the government be elected if national polls in the 20s?
Yeah, absolutely. The government is at present 3 parties. It needs at least 1 party, but likely 2 and maybe 3 that together have a majority of seats in the House. My goal is to keep making the case that the ACT Party is a party that helps you keep this government, but also make it better. Right now, people are feeling a tough winter. We get that, but they're also going to be voting on the economy as some of the work that we're doing to cut red tape and cut government waste pays off. All right, folks. Well, you talk to Nicola about it. See you later.
Hello. Welcome, Jason, back to your domain. Today's news about the official cash rate will be welcomed by many households and businesses who will see this as a positive sign for their spending and investment. It shows monetary policy and the Reserve Bank doing their job. And from our perspective, we note that someone on a $500,000 mortgage on a floating rate is now about $400 better off a fortnight than they were in the middle of last year. So that is welcome relief.
What do you make of the fact that the Reserve Bank pointing to lacklustre economic growth as one of the reasons behind this 50 basis point cut?
Well, we know that in the second quarter growth was lower than the Reserve Bank had been forecasting, and that they have acknowledged that they were surprised by that data, as many commentators were, and clearly they're now moving to address that.
Labour says that this is the Reserve Bank cleaning up yours and Christopher Luxon's mess. What's your response to that?
That we're cleaning up their mess. I completely disagree with their characterisation. It is the case that New Zealand is going through a difficult economic recovery. We are a government that came off the back of a Labour team that had let inflation ride out of control for 3 years, saw interest rates soar higher and faster, and we have had to clean up the results of all of that. So where we are today is that we are seeing that monetary policy is working. We are working to get the books back in order, but most importantly, drive growth with fundamental reforms to the economy.
$400 extra you were talking about, what would you encourage to use this business?
Well, it's very important I don't tell New Zealanders how to use their own money. They will make their own choices that best suit their households, but I know that for a family that is meaningful relief. I'd also just say, in terms of the statements from Barbara Edmonds and Chris Hipkins, the only The only ideas I have heard from them for this economy are cancel tax relief, borrow more. That is actually the wrong approach right now. Tax relief has ensured New Zealanders have more income than would otherwise be the case, and we are now heavily indebted as a country because of the big spending approach of the last government. So we are absolutely a government committed to reforms that will support growth, but I'm not hearing any from the other side.
Up to now, households have been using the extra cash often paid down the debt. Have you received any advice, as with so much economic activity, have you received any advice about, what level there might be a bit of an uptick of spending as opposed to people, making themselves a bit more secure?
Well, look, obviously it's very difficult for any economist to pick absolutely how much people will spend and how much they will save. The transmission of monetary policy, as it's referred to, is something that people do acknowledge is slowed down in New Zealand because so many people are on a fixed mortgage. What we know is that over the next 6 months, around half of mortgage debt will roll off a high interest rate, giving those people an opportunity for a lower interest rate. So what that suggests is that we are not yet feeling the full effect of interest rate reductions that have already happened, and we should be able to see accelerating relief over the coming months.
And obviously it's 0.5. Can't you expect the banks to pass that on?
I would expect the banks to pass that on.
Are you comfortable seeing inflation at 3%?
Look, obviously the Reserve Bank has a very solemn mandate, which is to keep inflation between 2 and 3% over the medium term. That does mean that they will, from time to time, tolerate a fluctuation. What I wouldn't be satisfied with is inflation staying out of band for 3 years, as was the case under Labour.
Are you nervous about that? You changed the mandate to make the Reserve Bank more focused on inflation. They're forecasting inflation being at the very top of the band, they're cutting interest rates 2 basis points.
I'm not nervous about that because I know that the Reserve Bank are intelligent enough to understand the meaning of the medium term, and they're quite explicit in their statement today that they see still a lot of spare capacity in the economy. So were there to be a very short-term fluctuation in inflation above 3%, they think there's enough capacity in the economy that it would come back down. So to some extent, they're obviously prepared to look through that.
Yeah, I'm relying on the interest rate. We look at the interest rates too much. In the economy, do we need to look at some other mechanisms? Firms 13% expecting to reduce their investments in the months ahead?
Oh, no question. The government has a very important role to play. That's why we're investing in more than $7 billion worth of public infrastructure between now and Christmas, starting new roading projects, hospital projects, school projects. That's why we're welcoming in more overseas investment, driving more free trade agreements. It's also why we've moved at pace to cut some of the red tape that stops people investing. A specific example, that fast-track legislation means that there will be workers on Auckland Port before Christmas that otherwise may not have been there. So we do see a very important role for the government, and we're working as hard as we can to support growth.
Are you surprised in the context of those steps that you've taken for the net 13% of firms expecting to reduce their investments in the years ahead?
Well, look, as I've reflected, I do think that the second quarter of this year was very challenging for many businesses, and that has absolutely affected sentiment. As a government, the number one thing we've done to give people confidence about investment for the future is say we will actually give you tax relief as a business if you make that investment. Investment Boost was a direct piece of action from the government to encourage firms to invest more.
Do you hope that lower interest rates will translate into more support for national next year?
Well, I know that lower interest rates result in the things that I want to see for New Zealanders, which is more investment, more job creation, higher incomes, and relief for everyday families. The reason I care about lower interest rates is I know that in every economy in the world where you have lower interest rates, people do better, and that's what we were elected to see.
Good news for mortgage holders today, but not so good news for the government. The National Party polled 29% on the new poll. Why is the National Party and the Prime Minister in particular so on the nose?
Well, I thought the bad news in that poll was really for Chris Hipkins, because it shows the only way he can possibly govern is with Te Pāti Māori, and he himself has acknowledged that they don't look like they're ready for government.
Still shows that they can.
with Te Pāti Māori, and I think that you will find that New Zealanders, having observed the complete chaos that's clearly unfolding within that party, their inability to even make clear that racist statements from their members are unacceptable, means that when New Zealanders scrutinise their options at election time, any party that says that they're willing to work alongside Te Pāti Māori with those approaches is going to look pretty ungovernable itself.
What is National Party government based on that point?
With our coalition partners, we will be growing our support between now and the election.
What do you think Christopher Luxon's on
Look, as I've reflected previously, we are a government that has clearly inherited a very difficult set of economic conditions that we are having to pull the country out of. That is difficult, and I don't think there isn't a single member of the Cabinet who wouldn't wish for a quicker recovery. And what I know, and what I think New Zealanders do see with Chris Luxon, is that he is doing the right things to bring that recovery on faster.
Minister, do you think the economy is still in recession? Is that how you would describe it?
No.
Would you surprised that the Reserve Bank agreed to pay 2 months pay in lieu of notice to Adrian Orr, the former governor, despite the fact that he appears to just sort of walked out?
All of the information that I have seen and all of the advice I have received tells me that the Reserve Bank negotiated their exit agreement with the former governor very strictly according to the terms of the contract they had signed with him, and that is what I would expect to see.
Is there anything in the exit agreement that surprised you?
Well, the information that the Reserve Bank released yesterday seemed to line up with what they have assured me, which is that they negotiated an exit in accordance with contract obligations.
And just back on the poll, so are you happy with National dipping under 30%?
No, absolutely not. I'd like to see us a lot higher, and actually the reason I'd like to see us a lot higher is because I believe that the policies that we as a party wish to pursue are going to be better for New Zealand, not just in the short term, but for the kind of New Zealand that we want to see. I mean, I want to see a New Zealand where more kids are learning to read, write and do maths better. You need structured literacy and numeracy. You need our government's reforms. I want to see a New Zealand where actually it's not just our ag sector growing, it's our tech sector growing. Well, you need stable economic management for that to occur. I want to see overseas investment coming in to create jobs. You need our government to get that. I want to see a culture in this country where we don't think that the way to success is through bigger and bigger welfare payments, but actually by giving people a path to independence. I think our party represents the values of most New Zealanders, and we need to be able to pursue our maximum policy agenda for New Zealand to do well in the world. So the more votes we get, the more able we are to do that.
Just on this poll, it's the best result in New Zealand first in nearly 10 years. Why are they doing so well without nationals?
Oh, well, look, that's a question for Mr. Peters, and I'm sure he'd be happy to give you his view.
Yeah, he actually said...
The Prime Minister's made clear that he has given all the Reserve Bank sort of backup, as he's described it in the past. Did any ministers give the Reserve Bank any sort of views or recommendations of this advisory?
No.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.
Yeah, man. 5 minutes, done. Hi. Is everyone good? Just your response to the latest OCR cut. I think you just...
come forward. Yep. Sorry, just at the general debate. The OCR cut today of 0.5% just quite clearly shows that the Reserve Bank is having to do the heavy lifting to help our economy, and that Christopher Luxon's plan is not working.
What plan is that?
Supposedly it was growth, despite a contraction in the June quarter, and despite since they've come in, the economy's contracted and smaller than before.
It's a slightly unusual decision. The Reserve Bank said the economy's not doing as badly as some might think, but because people think it's doing badly, they're worried about excessive caution. Do you think that the negative talk we have about the economy is actually what is making it worse, and that we need to predict the confidence?
That's actually a real good question for the Minister of Finance, who likes to call people who are being realistic about the economy merchants of misery. So ultimately, the Reserve Bank had to make a call. They could have gone just 2.5%. My concern from their media statement today is around the inflation, particularly being sticky. Yes, it might come down next year, but those administered costs that we are seeing through CPI coming through are quite a concern for me.
David Seymour says he's comfortable seeing 3% inflation. Are you comfortable seeing 3% inflation?
I'm comfortable seeing inflation coming down so that people can afford food on their table.
Would you like the Reserve Bank to pause any further cuts if inflation reaches the 3% level? Should that be a message to them to stop cutting?
Well, ultimately, I think one of the first things that the government did when they removed the maximum sustainable employment remit when they came into government, the Reserve Bank could have actually cut a little bit earlier given the job losses. So my concern again is that inflation is biting hard on Kiwis who are feeling it the most, and that's really at the grocery and in those administered costs which they can't avoid.
What's on poll?
This one you've got to ask Chippy, but yeah, surprised, but at the same time it's the trend, right? The trend is that the national government are losing support. But for Labour, we have to fight for every vote, and that's something that we're continuing to do.
What were you surprised about?
That it was under 30, you know. I mean, it was a surprise when I saw it.
Do you think National Conservative will poll above 30?
No, I mean, for me, it's under 30. I think it's the first time they've been under 30, so it's just a natural surprise, yeah.
Are you ready to be Finance Minister in a year's time?
I'm not allowed to swear. Won't do a Stuart Nash here, but yes, I am.
What do you make of Stuart Nash's text to Todd Play?
I am no longer responsible for Stuart Nash, so I will make no comment on it.
For a while, you know him very well. So do you think it was a wise judgment on his part?
Again, I make no comment on Stuart. You know, I worked for him, he is a friend, and, you know, I don't want to make a comment on something that a friend does. Ultimately, I said it at the mood of the boardroom, if you make a mistake, apologise for it.
Any thoughts on Adrian Orr's exit agreement? He appears to be being paid 2 months' salary in lieu of notice, so I guess that's paid for April and May, despite looking out of the bank on February 27, is that correct?
Ultimately, that's a decision between the Reserve Bank and the governor or the previous governor. I've said yesterday in the media in relation to that, ultimately there should have been greater transparency from the Minister of Finance, because she is also still responsible for the appointment of both the governor and the removal of the governor. And we've seen quite clearly that the lack of transparency from the government, just the slow dripping of information, could have been something that could have been dealt with very early on.
Do you have any concerns about the exit agreement itself in its terms?
I don't want to comment on an employment agreement. I think that was signed, so I don't want to comment on it. But I think more in general, though, when you have quite a significant financial leader, someone that is privy to a lot of information, in particular the strategy going forward for interest rate cuts, I think having a restraint of clause, a trade clause, may be suitable for that type of environment. But again, I wasn't there for the employment agreement.
So Barbara, I've got a niece and she lives in Moirewa. She's had her ovarian cancer operation postponed for a further 6 months. She has a 17-year-old who has just come out of school and no chance of mahi. She earns $60,000. The OCR, she couldn't really care less. She doesn't understand it, she doesn't know it. All she knows is that she needs an operation. She's not going to get it. She earns under the threshold for that parental support, and her baby can't get a mahi because there are no mahi up there. What does this all mean for her?
First of all, my thoughts to your niece. Having ovarian cancer, having family members who've had ovarian cancer is actually a really, really raw deal, and so I wish her well for when she does finally get her treatment. I was in Moirewa just recently last week with the passing of my father-in-law. I can see the economic downturn hitting really hard in Northland, in Moirewa, in Kaikohe, and also parts of Karaia. Ultimately, the OCR cut, yes, if she's a renter, it won't impact on her mostly, and that's why my view is around these 18 and 19-year-old cuts are quite harsh, given that there are no jobs. So we need to keep pushing on the government to ensure that there are jobs. That's their job.
It is expected that her 17-year-old baby will be her caregiver, since she is a single mama as well. So there is no, there were no entitlements or there was no kōrero or details around whether or not those tamariki who are caregivers of their parents and their koro kaumātua, which they are, there's nothing of that. So, we don't know where we're standing when it comes to whānau that are in that economic bracket.
No, I totally can understand that situation, and again, coming from a whānau that has the same very similar situation, it just shows how heartless this government is and that there are no nuances to this policy. My advice to that constituent, to that MP, is go see her local MP to see if there are other voluntary organisations that might be able to help
But
her.
is there anything about the OCR announcements that whānau like this can take heart from? Anything at all?
Hopefully they have a very charitable landlord that would reduce their rent. That is possibly the only thing. Yeah. Sorry, thank you.
Thank you.
All the best to your girl.
You know, there's